supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space.
What does it take to convince you that the dead do not always rest in peace?
This episode has been brought to you by Bratz Beard Care, premium beard oil made right here in Central Florida, handcrafted and expertly blended by Kelly Brat himself, including our own signature blend 3B. Use promo code 3Beards with a capital B, and you're going to save 20% off your order, along with free shipping. Chris was trying to show his bottle of beard oil when nobody could see it because it had the promo up there. So yeah, there we go. So we did this. At this time, we have got two esteemed guests with us. This Janet Wolter. She is co-author along with Alan Butler. Janet is a graduate of University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. Correct? Did I say it correct? Mm-hmm. Yes. I practiced that for a while. God, and she, she's the historical investigator and research assistant for its committee films. And then Alan Butler, he hails from Yorkshire, England. He is a author of several works, including The Goddess, The Grail and the Lodge, The Warriors and the Bankers, A History of the Knights Templar, from 1307 to the present, The Roslyn Chapel Decoded, and The Reason for Their Visit Today, America, the Nation of the Goddess, the Venus Families, and the Founding of the United States, which they co-wrote together. So welcome both of you to the show.
Thank you.
And so Alan, appreciate you showing up, because man, it's a little late over there. I mean, it's the witching hour.
Well, we never sleep in Britain.
That's right.
It's awesome.
We can't,
man.
We can't because there's too much going on.
That's awesome.
Oh man, I want to thank Ashley from Inner Traditions. She sent over advanced PDF for me to read, and I just wanted to, off the bat, I just want to tell everybody who hasn't pick up this book. This one just off a little bit off the title. When you get some of these ones, you're kind of expecting a little bit like a drier type read, where you're going to get a lot of facts, you're going to get a lot of stuff, and it's just going to be a lot of things unpacked. You guys wrote this in a way to where it almost had one of those faction style reads to it, where as you were reading it, you felt like you were actually reading, having a story told to you, as opposed to just being given these historical facts. And I just want to tell you guys, fantastic work. I really admire it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's very difficult with this kind of subject matter not to be tedious and a bit boring. So if we got it right, then that's great.
Absolutely.
Yes,
no,
we like stories.
And you guys did that expertly on this one. I mean, basically from the beginning on through. I mean, there was several stuff. Like I watched one you guys did it a few years ago with a couple of guys. You guys did an interview, and that's kind of led me to stuff. Some of the ones like I was just focused on and enjoyed which we'll get to here a little later on. But when you guys started talking about the layout of DC and New York, that was fantastically done. And so for anybody that doesn't know you guys personally, how did you and Alan embark on this journey?
Well, we met because of my husband's show, America Unearthed, Scott Wolter, and Alan was a guest on Scott's show, and they hit it off, and we became friends with Alan and his wife, Kate. And we started talking one day about some research, and I mentioned to Alan that there's something here in the United States called the Grange, the Patrons of Husbandry. It's an organization, a fraternal order that goes back to post-Civil War days. And he said to me, "What? The Grange?" Because in his world, what does Grange mean to you, Alan, in England?
In my case, the Grange meant something because I've done an awful lot of research in my life into a monastic order called the Cistercians. Very unusual sect of monks, started back in the 12th century. Now these people, they were different than most monks in that they actually worked for a living, in the sense that they were farmers and miners, and they did all sorts of stuff. But the one thing that was really different about them was that they had outlying farms away from their own abbeys, and these farms were called granges. So it was really strange that an organization in America called the Grange should crop up. But in the kind of research that Janet and I do, this sort of weird thing is happening all the time. But one thing led to another.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that got us started on this thread, and we found out that there is a connection between the two things, which is what we had to follow. And I don't know if you've heard of Newgrange in Ireland, but it's a passage tomb there, an ancient passage tomb. But it is named that because it's on an old grange of the Cistercian, an abbey. Is that correct, Alan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's another example of the use of the word. But here in the United States, it was a fraternal order that started after the Civil War out of necessity for helping to get the farm families back on their feet after the war, because they needed to start the big factories going up in the north, and they needed the food brought into the cities. So all of a sudden, farmers went from being subsistence farmers to overproducing so that they could sell their crops and get the food into the cities. So that was one of the reasons that they started the Grange. The government, helped by sending down some. One of the Freemasons, the man who started the Grange, Oliver Hudson Kelly, and Kelly was instrumental in building trust among the farmers in the South, because he, as a Freemason, could reach across the fence to other Freemasons, and it wasn't just a Northerner approaching a Southerner then at that point. So that was one of the ways he evaluated for the government, the Department of Agriculture, what kind of shape those families, those farms were in down in the South. And that's when they identified a need to try to pull them together so they could produce this food that was needed to get into the cities. And the Grange helped do that by giving support to these farm families. And it was a wonderful organization that I have been a part of myself here in Minnesota. And it allowed women into this fraternal order. And in fact, there's a certain percentage of the officers have to be women. So,
that's awesome.
One of the things that really came down to us immediately about the Grange was that their officers, their presiding officers, always appear in the guise of goddesses. They have goddesses' names like Demeter, for example, or Ceres. And I already knew, and in fact, Janet and I both already knew, that the Cistercian order of monks had shown a tremendously strong preference towards the Virgin Mary and to other females in the Christian story. And in addition to this, then their abbeys, for example, were always called after the Virgin Mary. And because of research that we've done in the past, we knew that in a lot of cases, the Virgin Mary was just another name for the goddess. It was the only way you could display any kind of paganism in the Middle Ages and after, and get away without being burned at the stake. So you may be praying to Demeter or whoever else, but as long as you called her the Virgin Mary, then you could get away with it. And I knew the Cistercians had been doing this for a long, long time. And so it all came together with the research Janet already had and watching you about the Grange, that it made it worthwhile for us to look deeper into this, because right from the start it seemed as if there was something rather odd going on here.
Right.
Well, no, go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
Was the structure of the Grange, like the organization, was it structured very similar to the like medieval Cistercian abbeys that Alan was just speaking of, 400 years earlier?
Yes, it was very, very similar, but it was even more similar to a group of people that we'd been researching for many, many years, who we came to call the Venus families. The Venus families have been known throughout the ages by all sorts of different names, but in a nutshell, what they were and what they are is a group of people who believe in certain things. First of all, they have great goddess awareness. Secondly, they believe in freedom of thought and freedom of action. And they have a great deal of influence, but at a subterranean level. And we'd found out earlier that it seemed that these people, the Venus families, were involved in the Cistercians, who were a really unique form of monasticism. But certainly the way that the structure of the Cistercians was organised was very similar to that of the Grange in terms of the officers, what the officers did, and what the intentions were. And of course, every member of the Grange, not being actually necessarily in the same place, was another farmer, another Grange in the system. But what really held it together more than anything else was the goddess awareness that went right through it.
Yeah.
No, so just kind of going like, you had, oh no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, that's
Yeah,
okay. It was very, it's and Mother Earth centric, of course, as farming you would expect to be. So, and it holds a lot of the ancient mystery school teachings. The mysteries of Demeter were part of all this, going back to the Greek days. That was carried forward in the Grange.
And of course,
and
of course the Cistercians were, more than anything else, farmers. I mean, you can put a lot of what happened in the agricultural revolution in Britain, and then ultimately the industrial revolution in Britain, and therefore everything else that happened across the pond, down to the influence of the Cistercians, who were colossal in their day.
One, it was kind of breaking, off like Jan was saying, where there's, women are highly involved in the Grange operation. Well, that would make sense, especially if it is something that is tied to like the Venus families and this goddess thing. I mean, of course, it would make sense that there would have, that a female presence would be something that would be not only just encouraged, but it would almost seem like it would be a prerequisite for being as part of these organizations. So that was really cool how you brought that up. And I wanted to, one of the things I was reading, maybe I said, I don't know if I'm out of order here or not, but one of the things was the names that were discovered in the tomb.
The names of the Talpiot tomb?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. The Jesus family tomb, the royal family. Mariamne, or Mariamne Mara, which is Mary of the Tower, Mary Magdalene. Of course, Jesus, son of Joseph. And these are all written in Hebrew or Greek in Mariamne's case. There's a Joseph. Maria. Yep, mother. Maria. And I think there's another brother, but I'm trying to remember which one.
Mattia and Judah.
Yes. So, I mean, all these names match the family of Jesus. And this was a tomb that was found in Jerusalem from the 1st century. And it has these are ossuaries that are marked with their names. The ossuaries are bone boxes.
Yeah.
And it's just statistically speaking, the odds of all those names being in the same tomb is astronomical. And for it to not be that family.
Yeah.
And that's,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead, Mark.
It was
No.
discovered in 1980 when it was construction blew the front part of it open, and that's how they discovered it.
Okay, and Janet, you're also covering the triangular pattern of the 3 skulls found in the tomb. Next to the ossuaries. All this stuff sounds very highly unusual, but it all fits in with the bigger picture that we're covering tonight.
Right. There was when the archaeologists processed the tomb, and they got down through the Terra Rosa soil that had flowed into the tomb over the centuries. They discovered there were 3 skulls that were much more or much less degraded, clearly from a different time period. And they were in a triangular pattern on the floor of the.
It's probably not surprising that it was a triangular pattern because the Venus families seem to live by triangles. Even the very latest work that Janet and I are doing is absolutely filled with triangles. And Washington, D.C. is literally made of triangles. So the fact that these are found in the Talpiot tomb, the fact that these names occur, that these names were so important to the Cistercians, that it's passed on so many centuries later into the Grange, it all starts to sew itself together in something that might look like a really badly made blanket until you start to look at it closely and you see that it all begins to make sense.
Right. Well, it's very possible that those 3 skulls were Templars that had come in and breached the tomb.
Now, the Templars are another offshoot of the Venus families.
Right. And the Cistercians.
And the Cistercians, yeah.
Well, you can see, before we get too far away, you could see where the way you were talking about the abbeys with the farms, you could see that was already a precursor to the Knights Templar, how they're set up where it was like you start with one, and then it just starts to spread, and then you just have these groups that just, and it becomes this interconnection. You can see this is like an early case. It's no wonder that they were a threat. When their banking system came in, I mean, they were they were, for all intents and purposes, just a monopoly that could crush any state.
Absolutely. Their order was an extension. They used the same rules and regulations as far as they could as the Cistercians. They were the brothers in arms and in, I suppose, commerce to the Cistercians, who, being monks, were not allowed to travel around so much, but they were very closely associated.
Wow, that's.
So you said New York and Washington D.C. are planned cities. Of all the places to put them, why were those 2 the planned cities?
I think New York has been made into a planned city in the sense that it's in a very useful position. It was a good place to put a city, but what has been overlaid on it is important in that case. Yeah. Whereas Washington, D.C., we are absolutely certain was deliberately planned to be what it is and where it is. It needs to be where it is for all sorts of geophysical reasons, but it also served an awful lot of purposes. And often some of these purposes you just wouldn't think about unless you looked at it very closely. Let me give you just one single example. It's very close to Maryland and it's in Virginia. Both of those names are significant in terms of what we're talking about. but that's nothing as to what they decided to do there. I think there was political reasons why they put it where it is, because the South didn't want it plumb in the North. The North didn't want it plumb in the South. So it was good from that point of view, but it's what they did with it in both cases, but especially so in the case of Washington, D.C. New York seems to have attracted all the things that we've found there since, because it's such a major city and because it's so important.
Yeah, Austin was like the kid at Christmas that couldn't wait for the presents, and so he just ripped right into it. He was just like, so we just jumped straight to New York and DC. Let's get to the good stuff. Just started tearing into the package. So since we've jumped into this, we'll just go with it. So let's talk about Cleopatra's Needle. We'll start with New York since we kind of talked on that, and I'll let you guys just. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody that doesn't know it, but we're going to start with Cleopatra's Needle. And either one of you you take it from there. And you just describe like what you saw, because when you said it, I'm like, oh my God, it does look like that. And I'll see if I can bring up a little map to show people.
I think I'm going to go and make a coffee now, because for my sins, I've been to just about every place in the States apart from New York. And Janet knows how green I am with envy every time she goes there. So I'll let her tell you about New York.
How have you made real quick? How have you made it to all these trips to the U.S. and you have never been to New York City? I mean, did you just refuse? Like, when the air flight, you're like, we're going to take you. No, I cannot go there. That's going to break my streak. Go to Boston. Go somewhere else.
I'm a bum. I'll only go to places where there's people who'll have me. I don't know anybody in New York.
Free coffee in DC. So he decided he must look like a bum.
Oh my God! Show off. It's like it's either just walking by, somebody walks up, hands you a $5 bill. It's like, here you go, sir. It's like, what? I just got off the plane.
No, I tell no lie. I went into a cafe at Arlington while I was waiting for the rest of the crew to arrive when we were doing a documentary, and I didn't know that you didn't generally just walk into a bar in the States and ask for coffee. So anyway, the guy gave me coffee, then he gave me another coffee, then he gave me another coffee. And when I tried to pay for it, he said to me, "That's all right." And he looked at me as if he thought I was down on my luck. So I got free.
Yeah, so we've talked about that ever since.
Well, that's a good plan. You just go walk in, can I have some coffee? Here you go, sir. Coffee. I know how to get free cups of coffee in DC now.
Was it at least good coffee? Was it all right?
It was great coffee.
All right.
There we go.
It was great coffee. Janet, tell them
about Cleopatra's Needle. Cleopatra's Needle is in Central Park right now in New York City. It is a real ancient Egyptian obelisk, and it sits right behind the Met Museum in Central Park, and it's amazing. And it's all carved on 4 sides. It's got weathering, very old. But that obelisk was brought to New York City, paid for by the Vanderbilts. And it came over on a ship back in, I don't even remember the year now, but it was the late 1800s, I believe. And it was an incredible feat to get that thing in the ship. So yeah, that's not the one. There you go.
Yep, just zoom in on it there. But yeah, that's.
You're lucky I'm not muted.
But anyway, Vanderbilt, because he paid for it to come over there, he had the privilege of deciding where to place the obelisk. And he put it in a very specific spot, as Alan and I figured out at one point, because not only is that one there, that one was placed last of 3. There are 2 other ones that are not ancient real Egyptian obelisks like that, but they are in the obelisk shape. One is near the Flatiron Building, and that is Theodore Worth's monument. And he's actually buried under that one. And so that would be the second one. Last one is down in the graveyard of St. Paul's Chapel, which is down closer to ground zero, that area of the island. And when you look at all three together, they make a pattern. It looks like it's a straight line at first, running north-south down the island, but there's actually a little bit of a dog leg to it in the center. And that is because we believe, Alan and I believe, that that is supposed to represent the belt stars of Orion.
The reason that Orion is so important is that it first came up in my research into really truly ancient British history. There are stone alignments in Britain from the Stone Age and the Bronze Age which have the same shape and the same pattern. And there are sequences of what they call henges, which are entire monuments, which are also in this shape and this pattern. And it means that wherever you go, you find that people have been trying to emulate this particular pattern of three stars on the ground. And if you take a picture of the stars and place it, resize it, and place it on any of these sets of structures, it fits exactly. So to find one in New York was truly amazing, because we knew by then that Orion's belt was associated with not only ancient Egypt, but it was a place that the Egyptians believed, for example, where people went to when they died. And it was the place where the gods resided. It was truly significant. And there we found it, picked out in these obelisks, right across New York. And it fitted like a glove.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Alan, you do have, well, you and Janet have the layout of the Thornborough henges as another example of the layout of Orion's belt, and that's going back to 3500 BC.
Absolutely. And that's about 20 miles from where I am talking to you from now. These henges, a henge is a ditch with a circular ditch with a mound around it. But the ones at Thornborough are truly gigantic. I mean, it's hard to say, but you would be talking at least 500 yards across for each of them. They stretch out for over a mile, yet the pattern alongside Orion's belt is absolutely perfect. And what's even more surprising is the same pattern exists with the three major pyramids on the Giza Plateau in Egypt. And there again, the pattern fits perfectly.
So, what did you and Janet, discover about Giza? The henges by you and New York City. Thousands of years later. What does all this mean on different continents?
The only conclusion we can come to is that we are dealing with a tranche of knowledge which is almost as old as we are, and that it has never entirely gone away. If we take the Thornborough henges, for example, are older than the Giza pyramids, and it can be shown mathematically that the Giza pyramids must have been planned at Thornborough because the connections to them are so close, so decisive. So there we've got two truly ancient things, and then we find something which is only really from the 1800s, I guess, in New York, and the same kind of belief structures seem to undermine all these things, and certainly the same mathematical patterns do.
Yeah, I was just showing the images. I found them. I was scrolling as you guys were talking there. I was scrolling through the book real quick because I'm like, I know that there's some images. I'm just trying to remember what page it was on, and then I found them.
273.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
yep.
there's a connection here to all this, in New York at least, with Freemasonry. Because when that Cleopatra's Needle was placed in Central Park, there was a huge parade. Over 6,000 Freemasons marched in that parade as the obelisk was put in place. It was a huge ceremony. So they are definitely involved. And if you go in the Grand Lodge of New York, which I've done, in their doorway, there's a painting of Cleopatra's Needle on the wall. It's the whole wall is a mural, and it's beautiful, and they're quite proud of it. And you see a lot of Egyptian iconography throughout Freemasonry in their rituals. It goes back to the Egyptian mysteries. It's part of their rituals. And if you also, there's one other surprise we realized doing this research, that if you follow that line out into the harbor, what do you see out there? The counterpart to Osiris. Orion is Osiris to the Egyptians. His counterpart is out in the harbor. Isis, Lady Liberty.
Is that the Statue of Liberty?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And once you've been told, and therefore you tend to open your eyes more, she is everywhere, and she's especially everywhere in New York, but even more so in Washington. You know, I've always said any alien that came down and landed and took a good look around him or herself would be quite sure that we worship a female deity.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's so many of these statues around. And America is truly the nation of the goddess.
Well, I wish I had your book back, about a year ago, because we actually took a trip and we were all over DC. And I'm looking at these things. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember those statues. I mean, I remember seeing all these things in layout, and that's where, when we got into that section about Washington Monument and the stuff, the story, especially, I remember you from the interview, you telling Janet when you were up in the viewing area of the at that right time, and I thought that was a cool story where you're sitting here, your message over to Alan, give him the information, how excited he was, and I'll let you explain that to people, just because once you get this thing, it's like, oh my God, it makes sense. So yeah, go for that. What you discovered about the Washington Monument?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is that we realized that the Washington Monument, of course, has a very large shadow on a sunny day, and it's a short shadow in the summertime when the sun is high in the sky, but it can be a longer shadow, of course, in the winter when the sun is low in the sky. And what we realized is not only does the shadow just play around on a daily basis through the National Mall, but on certain days of the year, the tip of the shadow actually points or touches certain places on the mall that are significant on those dates. Which is amazing.
Yeah. The best example of that is Constitution Day. If you're up at the right time on Constitution Day and the sky is clear, the shadow from the monument runs right up the mall and touches the doors of the Capitol. And there's no more significant day in the year for it to do that, to show how America gained its own absolute freedom and became what it is. And when we start to look at the dates involved, that only happens twice in a year. It happens on Constitution Day, and it happens on March the 25th, both of which are the dates of really significant pagan celebrations. And in the case of the Constitution one, it was a time in a place called Eleusis in Greece, where the festival was held for the goddess Demeter, who was the greatest goddess of them all at that period in history.
harvest, because that's in mid-September. September 17th is what we're talking about.
And then we turn that around. Who knows more about the harvest than the Grange?
Right.
It all comes back to the same things in the end. It's
Right.
it's all to do with the conjoining of the sun and the earth. And the harvest is particularly important because the harvest is the symbolic death of
There you
the
go.
God who has to be reborn again with the next corn. So it's all linked. And Washington, D.C. is truly incredible. What we've told you so far is just a tiny, tiny part of what takes place.
You're right. And the most significant thing is what it does on what's coming up, the winter solstice on December 21st. And that is when the shadow can reach its greatest extent because the sun is so low in the sky to the north. That's toward the ellipse and the White House, that direction. And if you think of the ellipse as an egg, the shadow of the monument, there you go, just penetrates the egg on the 21st of December, on the solstice. So, and if you happen to stand at that spot, it'll look like the sun is on top of the monument, sitting there. So it's absolutely a fertility thing of Mother Earth with the sun.
Well, I was going to say, when the interview, that was one of the questions I couldn't wait to get to this part because I was thinking about it too. Is because the obelisk is definitely a phallic, symbol, just, and so here's this juxtaposition. You have the egg, this ellipse, the phallic thing of the monument. It's on the winter solstice. I mean, everything's like, it's, once I started, I'm like, it makes complete sense. I mean, it's just, so you can see it right there. It's like, yeah, I mean, I could see how this stuff, the imagery's right there. I mean, it tells the story. And the amazing part of, and this is one that, as we toured around there, and you guys have really done a great job in this book, is you've shown just the absolute brilliance of the people that laid this city out. I mean, this wasn't something like, oh, guys, man, we got lucky. Look at this. I mean, you could tell there was a design to this.
One good example of that is when the Washington Monument was first planned, a particular site was chosen for it. But in between that and what happened later, they obviously didn't have it in the right place. So they shifted the site on the pretext that the ground wasn't strong enough to support it. Mind you, they only shifted it about 50 yards, but they said it wouldn't stand where they were originally going to put it. And that meant that they skewed the line of the mall by 1 degree south. And we worked out why. They couldn't have done any of the things they did with the Washington Monument if it had been anywhere else. It had to be exactly where it was. And they even shifted all the plans and shifted them out to make it so.
Right. And they didn't have computers, guys. No computers, no calculators.
It's
crazy.
It's very complex how they figured it out. I'm amazed.
Well, it's kind of everything. It's like the ancient, just is when people look back at here, you think we have all this technology, we can do all these things, and you think back, just like you said, they didn't have this stuff. I mean, these are the people that they couldn't plan ahead. They knew exactly when these stars were going to line up at this exact moment, and you can't just carve the stone right as okay, guys, ready, okay, punch the hole.
No, they were very bright. I mean, on the day that Janet and Scott took the picture of the sun on the very point of the ellipse, it had taken everything I knew about math and several computers just to be able to tell her. But these people, they'd done it.
Yeah, and that was quite a day, wasn't it, Alan?
Oh, one of the most important days of my life.
Scott and I went to DC to actually prove our theory and see the shadow on the ground. But it was kind of a partly cloudy day, so the sun wasn't really strong. So Alan had told me, because we were there a little bit before the solstice, a few days, that's just when it worked out for our schedule. we knew where the shadow should be on the ground. It wouldn't quite be up all the way to the ellipse, but we knew where it should be based on what Alan had worked out. And his wife said he was like a cat on a hot tin roof, waiting for us to email.
Oh my God!
If I can be crude, I was wetting myself.
Well, it was like we were talking about. It's just the same thing. It's just they're building these monuments, and they built it to this exact height, to this exact position, to where they were able to get that photo for you to prove that your guys' theories. I mean, this isn't something that just horrible all these amazing coincidences. Like, oh wow, look what we just we ended up with. I mean, it just when you look at like the Federal Triangle, I mean, you go through all this stuff. I mean, these things were all planned exactly how they were supposed to be, and it blows me away. I mean, I wish I had your book when I was in there. I would have been able to see so many
more fun for you. Definitely.
We were and still are blown away by it because it's true. It's there. Anybody can look at it. Loads of people have looked at it all since, but I still don't believe it.
And
Incredible.
Craig posted that image.
That is the sun, not the moon. It looks like the moon kind of because it was partly cloudy. So that's how we knew we were in the right spot for the end of the shadow.
Wow.
You can't get much more precise than that.
Yeah,
so that was pretty neat. But it points to things on other dates too, like 4th of July. It points to Jefferson's Pier, which is a little granite block that's on the lawn of the Washington Monument. It's a short shadow then because the sun is so high in the sky. But that little monument was significant because that was Thomas Jefferson's meridian that ran down the middle of D.C. through the Washington Monument, the White House, and the ellipse. So that little marker marks Jefferson's meridian, and the 4th of July was significant for him because that was nice.
And it also points out
a small
VE Day and VJ Day every year on a monument, the World War II monument, which wasn't even built until the 1970s.
Yeah, it was built in 2006.
2006 was finished.
Yeah, it finished. Yeah.
Small key detail a small key detail I have to add is that Freemasonry refers to the sun a lot. So, I mean, that coincides even more that it was conducted by Freemasons because the Freemasons refer to the sun a lot in a lot of rituals. So for the sun to line up exactly with different monuments and different triangles, and they had to have some meaning to that. But it was meaning to them.
We've been convinced all along that Freemasonry is important in all this and is part of this organization that we call the Venus Families.
Well, Alan and Gina, since we're talking about the sun, and Craig just posted the graphs of the shadow from the Washington Monument going to the east, and then where it goes to the west. I think the last graph was August 15th. You also include the rising sun chair from the Declaration of Independence and signing of the Constitution. That has depending on your interpretation, a rising or setting of a sun as well.
Absolutely. And Washington himself was sitting in that chair when those historic moments came. It can't be a coincidence.
No, man.
It's so much to process. I'm gonna sound stupid, but why America? You know what I mean? Like, what is so significant about the memorial and all these dates that later on, like you said, 2006, now the World War II memorial, nobody would have thought that the shadow would hit that. Like, it's just crazy. Who told them to do, hey, put it here, put this here,
The first reason it had to be America is because your pale ale is so good. But,
You do love that, don't you?
but I think it's fair to say that plans were laid down a long time before. We know from researches in other directions that people have been going backwards and forwards to what is now the United States for a very, very long period of time. And I think, and I think Janet agrees, the Venus families had always wanted to have a place where they could try to get their own ideas about the world to work properly. And that was never possible in Europe, but it was possible in the United States.
Right. We know the Templars were coming over here and bringing their treasure. My husband, Scott, has done a lot of research on that. And it started with the Kensington Ruin Stone, which was found here in Minnesota. And that is a Templar document. And we are very sure about that. And it was placed as a land claim in the center of the continent. Why there? Because that's where all the rivers headwater from. If you can put a land claim at the headwater of a river system, you claim all the land associated with that drainage basin. So that you put your land claim in Minnesota here, you've got a river that runs to the north, you've got a river that runs to the Great Lakes, and you got a river, the Mississippi, that runs to the south. You claim half the continent. So
it's crazy. Like most of our episodes recently in the past few months all lead back to Freemason, and it's like it just seems like the Freemasons are the whole leaders of the world. It feels like, I don't know, because everybody we talk to, different subjects, Freemason this, Freemason that. I'm like, what is up with the Freemasons? They're in every subject, and it's like,
yeah.
You know,
well, it's and even in your book, you guys talk about Sir Francis Bacon. I'm starting to see so many, connections between everything where we've talked about, where his ties to Shakespeare, ties to the infamous island that never releases any secrets, Oak Island. You have all these things, and you see Sir Francis Bacon always pops up in these things, and you're like, there's something to this, because here is, the connection to your guys' work, the connections to these, the Shakespeare conspiracy, there's links to Templars. You're like, at some point you have to go beyond disbelief to looking, at least in an academic, aspect. You have to look at it and say, there has to be something here that this individual keeps getting tied to all these different aspects. There must be something to this. What it is, we don't know, but there's got to be something.
That's another fantastically interesting subject in its own right. What was taking place in Elizabethan London, the way things were moving there, the secret societies that existed there. The only way you could exist in those days was to be in a secret society. If you weren't going to get taken out and have your head chopped off or burned at the stake. And Bacon was just the most incredible man and had tremendous influence.
Yes. But Alan, tell them how he died. What killed him?
He was killed by a frozen chicken.
What? Hold on a second. All right.
I know that.
He was coming home from a friend's house one day in winter, and it suddenly struck him, looking at the snow, that he might be able to keep food fresh with snow. So he went and bought the chicken, stuffed it with snow, caught a cold, and died 2 days later.
Oh my God. I'm processing this. I may be wrong here. Did someone say something about December 21st being a special date?
The solstice.
Is it anything have to do with the Jupiter and Saturn are going to align on December 21st this year? Does that have meaning at all with it being the winter solstice?
I think
I would hesitate to give that any special meaning because it's something that happens fairly frequently. But never say never, because
Yeah.
These things all happen in patterns,
Yeah.
you know.
But
and now you set me off again, and I'll have to go and look it up.
Well,
Well,
it's just I remember I see it and I'm like, wait, someone said December 21st. What's going on? And I see the Saturn and Jupiter kind of come together. I'm like, wait a second, hold on a second, whoa. We need to discuss this.
Yeah, it's a great alignment, isn't it? Aren't there 4 or 5 planets that align that day?
yeah, I said it's pretty crazy, and that's a good job on pointing that out there, Austin. Yeah, because it's always been that one thing. Jupiter's always been the male, Venus, female. It's and you have these two that are in perfect alignment on this. Why is this day celebrated? Wow, well, look at that. Everything's aligned. It's once we get to the thing of the ancients, where it's just how they were able to do this prior to even the discovery of a telescope, and these people knew about planet alignments, stars. And it's just as we do these subjects, and I read books, like your guys', it keeps more and more things. Just where did this knowledge? I'm trying to best way to put it. Where how did we lose this?
Because we don't look to the sky anymore. Back then, there weren't the blazing lights that we have now, and the sky was a theater every night. And that's where their mythology came from. That their teachings, it was all passed on generation to generation through initiation.
I think they must also have had some optical assistance, though, because it crops up so often. For example, in Nordic mythology, Odin, the god Odin, represents the planet Saturn, and he always is shown wearing a broad-brimmed hat, which to me has always spoken of the rings of Saturn. In Nordic mythology, Jupiter has 4 horses that pull 4 goats actually, that pull his chariot. The 4 major moons of Jupiter. I'm sure they knew. I'm sure they had lenses.
It
makes sense.
Alan and Janet, and since we were just talking about all the planetary alignments and celestial observations, just to go back to the deep antiquity section of your book, more specifically about the Thornborough henges, that shadow line concepts, with the Washington Monument reaching certain points, based on the 555 feet height of the monument, but that those shadow lines also were used at megalithic sites like at Avebury, and when Maria Wheatley's a guest sometime in the next few weeks, she could get into that very ancient practice as well. So, your book really ties together this knowledge that never went away. It was used more prominently thousands of years ago, and it was kind of like rediscovered by the time the Constitution was written and Washington was laid out. You present that there was a continuous line of thought.
Absolutely. And what is amazing in the case of Washington is that it's absolutely hidden in plain sight. So anybody can see any of these things. And I'm sure that Janet and I have not found them all. I'm sure there's much more to find.
No, but Janet included all the different photos at the like the Sulpice Church, just all the different obelisks, and you had many photos, from Washington, New York. You didn't have to find all of them. You presented enough cases that okay, well, there's enough of a pattern there that you made your point.
It's true.
Yeah.
Well, the one in Saint Sulpice is in Paris. That's a church in Paris, a very old church, and in that church is an obelisk that's built basically into the wall, and there's a line that's laid out in the floor of brass that runs across the altar and goes through the center of the church and ends up at that obelisk. And that's because there's a lens in the window where the sun shines in, and on certain times of the year that there's a little spot, it's like a little spotlight that runs along that brass line, and it'll hit certain things on certain times of the year. Like the equinoxes, it always hits the altar where there's a big brass seal placed in the altar that you can only see if you walk up there and look for it. But on the winter solstice and the summer solstice, it hits either the plaque on the floor closer to the window, or it hits that obelisk, and there's a sun on top of it that's made of brass. So we know
That's amazing.
that's what they were trying to do, is to show how the sun moves across during the year. And they said that it was because it was something to do with calculating the Easter date. But
I'm just picturing as you do that from Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark. I'm just picturing it just as you just watching this beam just going across and just also
I think that's where they got the idea. But we've often wondered, Janet and I, whether there is a direct connection between St. Sulpice Church in Paris and Washington, D.C., because there was a lot of French people in America at that time.
Could be. Well, L'Enfant designed Washington.
Yeah.
Sorry, my dog barking. Scott's coming there.
Oh no, you're good. No, you're good. Like I said, we knew we got to wrap it up here because we knew you got.
Hold on.
You
Before we do that, I like doing this one because love working with Craig and Chris and learning new subjects. This may be a really stupid question, but what is the significance with the winter solstice and the summer solstice? Why is everything lining up on those exact days?
It's because it's the extremities of the sun, and our ancient ancestors in particular were totally fascinated by it. In the winter, the sun moves away to the south, and thereby it looks for a while each year as if it's going to keep on going, and if the world's going to get colder and colder, and we're all going to die. So they kept their celebrations to that time of year to make sure the sun would come back. And of course, the exact reverse is true at the summer solstice, which is the hottest part of the year, where in the hot parts of the US and in the hot parts of Europe, they must have once thought that the earth was going to fry. So they had to carry out these procedures in their minds, to make sure. But there's much more to it than that, because that's looking at it as if these people were not very bright, but we're beginning to realize that they were extremely clever.
Yeah, because it almost sounds like the Keystone Cops type thing where you're just like, okay, get it back. Okay, too much. Guys, go away.
Absolutely. And science comes up with some pretty kooky explanations. They call people like us weird, the scientists, but some of them come up with some really weird ideas.
No, exactly. Well, guys, I can't thank you both enough for coming on here. I mean, everybody. I'm bringing it up here again so that way everybody can get
the book.
Get this. Bring up the book. Yep, right there. America, Nation of the Goddess, book. The Venus Families and the Founding of the United States. Very well done. For anybody that doesn't like to picture things in their mind too, they have included some very nice images throughout the entire book to help you out with that, so that you don't. They saved you the trouble of Googling that, so that was very, very well done. innertraditions.com. You can go there. You can purchase the book from them directly, or you can go to Amazon. The king of all books. Those two are fantastic options. I believe you might be in some of the mom and pop bookstores as well.
Probably.
Yeah,
Also, if you want one signed, well, it would only be signed by me because Alan lives across the ocean from me. But you can also go to Scott's and my website, which is www.hookedx.com. And
Okay.
any books that are purchased on our site, we always sign.
Well, there you go. That you beat me to the question too, because I was going to say that.
Book, Craig. There you go.
Yeah, I know. Because I learned that from another author. I bought the book, and all of a sudden, I do my research, and there it is. It says if you want a signed copy, purchase it here. I'm like, yeah, I learned my lessons about doing research. So if you would like a signed copy by the author, I said go to hookedx.com, and Janet will gladly sign it for you. And then whenever we can get Alan to make that trip to New York and see if they'll accept him, when he gets off there. We can all take our books and line up there at the gate and wait for him to come through, and it can be like a celebrity. He can come through and just autographing everything as he walks past.
Janet's gonna have like 20,000 books like stacked up for him to sign.
I'll only do it if you give me a cup of coffee.
Yeah, at the end of the line, you got to sign books first to earn it. So thanks, you guys. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the night. Give love to wife for coming in and doing tech support for you at the witching hour. That was very nice of her. So
stay safe, guys.
You too. And we'll be in touch. We'd love to have you guys back on. So thanks again for that. So Alan, have a great night. Janet, let you go get your dinner there. We appreciate you giving us your time this evening, and we will definitely be in touch. So everybody, please go pick up the book, American Nation of the Goddess, and where those Amazon and there's hookedx.com to get a signed copy. So have a great night.
Thank you.
So everybody, this episode was brought to you by Bratz Beard Care. Bratz is amazing beard oil. All of us use it. All of us love it. We're trying to get Mark to grow a beard. So far, he's resisted every attempt. So eventually, he will grow it on that chin. We'll see. But I'm just picturing it's going to come in more of like the Chinese like Fu Manchu thing. It'll just be that one with that wispy one that he has to.
That's going to take a while to get it right. But I'm shooting to like I said last week. Now that I'm on TV and I go outside, people say, "Are you that guy from Three Beer?" They kind of mistake me for Chris, but I'm trying for that Chris's look, but I'm getting there.
It's a certain level of
it's taking a while.
Yeah. The genetics have to kick in at some point.
You're gonna need lots of suntan lotion and that spray on tan.
Oh, Jesus God!
But Kelly has some amazing products too. Chris swears by the lip balm. He uses that stuff all the time. I mean, I'm not sure, what it is about it, but Chris swears. He's just like, this stuff is amazing.
The lips are soft. You can ask Lisa. They're very soft.
I was going to say, if you said, the lips soft, you ask these guys, I'm going to say, no, I don't know that. I don't know that at all. All right, everybody, check us out on all the socials. We're everywhere, and all we're waiting for is for your subscription. Patreon.com. Before I forget, also Nanny Cakes 407. I almost forgot Nanny Cakes. Oh, so terrible. 407-923-2898 in the Central Florida area. Mention that you know us. She will take pity on you. And I don't know what she's going to do other than just give you 15% off and just say, I'm sorry. So get a cake here in the Central Florida area. Amazing.
Hit that bell.
Podcast.com. Everybody like, subscribe. Please share us. Get us out there. We will love you for it.
Hit that
Everybody
bell.
Have a great night. We will see you later. Good night.